Hate is one of the most powerful forces in human history. It can unite people under a single banner, but it can also destroy everything they've built together. The story of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany is not only a story about war or politics. It's a story about how an idea rooted in hate, can turn neighbors into enemies, friends into strangers, and ordinary people into participants in unthinkable crimes. It's a story about how philosophy, when twisted, can become poison. To understand this, we have to start not with Hitler himself, but with the soil that allowed him to grow. Germany, after World War I, was humiliated, poor, and broken. Millions were unemployed. Inflation was so high that people used money as wallpaper because it was worth less than the paper it was printed on. The people were desperate for someone to blame, someone to give them a reason for their suffering. This is where philosophy, or rather the misuse of philosophy, began to shape politics. The German people were told that they had been betrayed, not defeated, that their nation had been stabbed in the back by traitors, communists, and Jews. Hitler didn't invent this idea, but he amplified it. He transformed resentment into identity. Hate became a way to feel powerful again. In every era, people look for meaning when they suffer. When life feels unfair, we look for explanations. But the simplest explanation is often not the truest one. Instead of facing the complex reality that war, bad leadership, and global economics had brought Germany down, it was easier to believe in a story where we are pure and they are corrupt. This is the philosophy of hate. It gives people a sense of purpose by giving them someone to despise. Hitler was not just a soldier or a politician. He was a storyteller. He told people that they were chosen, that history had destined them to rule. He told them that Jews were not only enemies, but parasites, subhuman beings who had stolen Germany's greatness. To a starving, broken nation, that lie felt comforting. It gave people a reason to believe again. Hate became hope. And here's the dangerous part. Hate, once accepted, does not stay small. It grows. It seeps into schools, books, speeches, and daily conversation. Children began to sing songs about the pure race. Teachers taught racial theories as science. Even doctors and philosophers began to believe that some lives were more valuable than others. What started as prejudice turned into policy, and then into genocide. The disturbing truth is that many of the people who participated in Nazi crimes were not monsters. They were ordinary. They had jobs, families, and dreams. Some even thought they were doing something good. How does that happen? It happens when an idea replaces empathy. When people stop seeing others as individuals and start seeing them as symbols. A neighbor becomes a Jew. A friend becomes an outsider. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened step by step. First came the language, subtle words that made cruelty sound normal. Then came the laws that separated people into categories. Then came silence, when good people chose not to speak, because they were afraid or because they convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. And finally came violence, when silence turned into consent. Philosophically, the Nazi ideology drew from distorted versions of Darwinism and Nietzschean thought. They claimed that life was a struggle where only the strong survive. They argued that morality should be defined by power, not compassion. But this was a deliberate misunderstanding. Nietzsche himself despised anti-Semitism and nationalism. Yet his words were twisted to justify hatred. This shows how dangerous philosophy can become when stripped of its humanity. Hate always begins with an illusion of righteousness. People convince themselves that their anger is justified, that they are protecting something sacred, their nation, their race, their religion. But once hate becomes moral, it becomes unstoppable. Killing no longer feels like murder, it feels like duty. That's what happened in Nazi Germany. Millions of ordinary people became part of a machine that killed 6 million Jews, along with millions of others. Roma, disabled people, political opponents, and anyone who didn't fit the mold of the perfect human. What's chilling is that none of this required supernatural evil. It required philosophy turned into propaganda. It required fear mixed with pride. It required people to stop questioning. The philosopher Hannah Arendt called this the banality of evil. She said that great crimes are not committed only by fanatics, but by people who fail to think. People who simply follow orders, obey rules, and do what everyone else is doing. And that's why this story still matters. Because hate never disappears. It hides, waiting for moments of fear, insecurity, and chaos to return. Whenever a society feels humiliated, or whenever people feel powerless, hate offers an easy way out. It tells you that your problems are not your fault. They are the fault of them. Whoever they are. It simplifies the world into good and evil, us and them. And once that happens, logic, empathy, and morality fade away. Think about how this pattern repeats even today. We see it in online communities that radicalize young people. We see it in political movements that use fear of immigrants or minorities to gain votes. We see it in social media algorithms that reward outrage because it keeps people scrolling. Hate has become profitable. It spreads faster than truth because it feels more exciting. But philosophy, real philosophy, teaches us to question. It teaches us to ask why we believe what we believe. It asks us to see the other person not as an enemy, but as another human being trying to make sense of the same world. The lesson from Hitler's story is not just about him. It's about what happens when we stop thinking critically and start feeling collectively without reflection. The Holocaust did not begin with gas chambers. It began with words. It began with speeches, newspapers, jokes, and whispers. It began with ideas that made cruelty sound reasonable. It began with the belief that some lives were less valuable than others. By the time people realized the cost of those ideas, it was too late. The philosophy of hate is powerful because it speaks to emotions more than reason. It promises belonging, strength, and justice, but it delivers only suffering. It tells you that by destroying others, you can heal yourself. But history shows the opposite. Germany did not become great through hate. It became broken. The war that began with pride ended with ruins, loss, and shame. There's another truth hidden in this story. Hate thrives when love feels weak. When people lose faith in empathy, kindness, or forgiveness, hate fills the gap. Hitler didn't just offer political solutions, he offered spiritual ones. He gave people a false sense of destiny. He replaced religion with ideology, morality with loyalty, and compassion with obedience. People prayed to flags instead of gods. If we truly want to prevent another tragedy like this, we must learn to recognize the early signs. When political leaders start dividing people into pure and impure. When truth becomes whatever serves the powerful. When disagreement turns into betrayal. When fear is used to control thought. These are not just political warnings. They are philosophical ones. Philosophy is not only about abstract questions like what is truth or what is morality. It's also about how ideas shape lives. In Nazi Germany, philosophy was weaponized. Today, the same danger exists whenever we stop questioning the morality of our beliefs, whenever we justify cruelty by calling it justice, whenever we silence others in the name of freedom. The story of Hitler is not just a story of one man's madness. It's a story of how millions can be led astray by a seductive idea. It's about how a philosophy that promised greatness delivered horror. It's about how fragile civilization really is when ideas lose their ethical roots. So, what can we learn from it? Maybe the opposite of hate isn't love. Maybe it's understanding. When we understand where hate comes from, fear, humiliation, ignorance, we can disarm it. We can stop it before it grows. Because hate doesn't start in governments or armies. It starts in the human heart. And just as ideas created it, new ideas can replace it. The question is not just how Hitler convinced a nation to hate. The deeper question is, how did so many intelligent, educated people let it happen? The answer is uncomfortable. They believed in the wrong philosophy. They replaced truth with ideology, compassion with conformity, and wisdom with blind faith in power. And that's why the philosophy of hate remains the most dangerous philosophy of all, because it disguises itself as meaning, as strength, as belonging. But beneath it there is only emptiness, only destruction, only loss. In the end, the lesson is simple, but not easy. Every time we feel anger toward a group or a person, we should pause and ask, is this anger built on truth or on fear? Is it helping me understand, or is it making me blind? Because history shows that hate always ends the same way, not with victory, but with ashes. That is the philosophy of hate, and that is why we must never let it become our philosophy again.